She really does nothing. Absolutely nothing. That's what she said, loud enough for her phone to catch every syllable, soft enough to pretend she wasn't humiliating me on purpose. And then she laughed. A sharp, careless laugh that sliced right through the quiet of our living room. If you've ever stayed silent to keep peace, this story will speak directly to your heart. Watch till the end, you won't forget what happens when silence finally breaks. I didn't react, not the way she wanted me to. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I didn't even turn my head. Instead, I kept folding the children's towels, smoothing each corner with slow, steady hands. My stillness distracted her more than outrage ever could. Behind her, the afternoon sun was slipping through the blinds, making stripes across the hardwood floor. Her shadow moved back and forth as she danced around, adjusting her camera, testing angles, flipping her hair as if she were the star of some bright little performance. It was 4:12 p.m. I remember the time clearly because the oven timer had just beeped, signaling the chicken casserole my son liked was done. I turned it off before the noise disrupted her recording. Small courtesies she never saw. My email thinks childcare and cleaning are optional, she continued in that sing-song voice she used for her online audience. Like, imagine living in our home and contributing nothing. It must be nice. Hundreds of people would hear that. Thousands maybe. She had been growing her little following, and each week she pushed the boundaries a little more. First playful teasing, then passive-aggressive remarks, now full accusations. She treated disrespect like content. And the worst part? She delivered it with a smile, the kind of smile that fools strangers and wounds the people who live with it. I finished folding the towels and set them on the chair beside me. My hands were warm from the laundry, but inside, a coldness spread through my chest. Not anger exactly, something quieter. Something heavier. A knowing. She had no idea what she was doing. Or who she was doing it to. I walked into the kitchen, letting the faint scent of rosemary drift around me as I checked the casserole. The golden top looked perfect, bubbling slightly at the edges. I opened the window above the sink, letting the cool November air slip in. The sky outside was pale, tinged with winter light. Even the wind felt like it knew something was shifting. From the living room I could still hear her talking into her phone. I mean, come on, she's been living with us 8 months. 8. And she's still acting like a guest. Pause. Another laugh. A deliberate flick of her voice, designed to sting. I dried my hands on a small kitchen towel and leaned against the counter, letting her words settle. They didn't hurt the way they once might have. Maybe because I'd already seen hints of this coming long before she opened that app. Maybe because I'd spent the past year paying closer attention than she realized. She thought older women were slow. She thought age made us blind. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that my memory was sharper than hers, my patience longer, and my understanding far deeper. I stepped back into the hallway to pick up a stray crayon the youngest had left near the stairs. The small things she ignored were everywhere. Half-finished drawings, sticky cups left on the coffee table, shoes scattered where she dropped them when she filmed her clean with me videos. Videos where she claimed she was tired of cleaning up after everyone else. I let out a slow breath. She truly believed her own performance. You guys, look at this, she said, spinning her camera toward the pile of toys. This is what happens when you live with someone who doesn't help. But I had been the one who cleaned it yesterday. And the day before. And the week before that. She never noticed. Or maybe she noticed and pretended otherwise. I hadn't decided which was worse. As she kept filming, little details around the room began catching my eye. Too many to dismiss. The missing grocery money envelope on the dining table. The lipstick-stained mug she left behind this morning, though she claimed she didn't have time for coffee. The empty wine bottle shoved halfway under the couch, left from a night she said she was working overtime. I wasn't spying. I wasn't snooping. These things sat in plain sight. She simply assumed no one paid attention. I did. Every day. Because with women like her, the truth doesn't appear all at once. It shows itself piece by piece, quietly, steadily, until one day the picture becomes impossible to ignore. She finished filming, let out a satisfied sigh, and tossed her hair over her shoulder as if she had just completed something important. I'll post it in a minute, she said loudly, pretending she wasn't addressing me. People love honesty. Honesty. The word almost made me smile. I picked up the casserole dish using my thick oven mitts and carried it to the counter. As I set it down, the aroma filled the kitchen, Warm, familiar, comforting. Everything a home should be. And yet the atmosphere around us felt tight, like the air before a storm. The kind where birds go silent and trees hold their breath. She strutted into the kitchen, still energized from her recording. "Did you make that again?" she asked, as if the sight of a prepared dinner annoyed her. You don't have to. We didn't ask you to take over the kitchen." Kept my voice level. "I know." She blinked, as if she expected a long explanation or a defensive apology. My calmness unsettled her. I saw it in the brief flicker of confusion across her face. She couldn't read me, and that bothered her more than any argument would have. She pulled out her phone again, scrolling through the comments that were already appearing. Her smile returned, wider this time. "People are agreeing with me," she said proudly. "They're saying every family has that one person who refuses to contribute." I reached for a spoon to stir the vegetables on the stove. "Is that what you think I do? Refuse to contribute?" I didn't ask with bitterness. I asked with curiosity, genuine, measured, intentional. My tone made her pause. She hesitated just long enough for the silence to thicken between us. Then she shrugged. "I'm just being real. That's what people want. Authenticity." I didn't correct her. There was no point. I simply wiped a small splash of sauce off the counter and placed the spoon beside the stove. My movements were steady, deliberate. Silent power, the kind she didn't understand yet. As she walked away, humming to herself, I noticed something on the edge of the counter. Her planner left open from earlier. A page with dates circled. Nights she said she was working late. The same nights my son worried she was exhausted. The same nights I stayed home with the children while she called me clingy for stepping in. I closed the planner gently, more to steady my own thoughts than to hide anything. She never noticed what she left behind. I walked into the living room, picked up the towels I folded earlier, and began placing them in the hallway cabinet. As I did, I caught my reflection in the small mirror hanging beside the bedroom door. My face looked calmer than I felt. Years of experience will do that. You learn that storms don't need to be loud to be powerful. Some move quietly until the right moment. And I had reached that moment. Not revenge. Not rage. Clarity. When I returned to the living room, she was reviewing her video before posting it. "This is perfect," she murmured. "People love drama." I stood at the edge of the room and watched her without saying a word. The glow from the screen lit her face, highlighting a kind of selfish pride that made everything suddenly make sense. For months I tried to understand her shifts. Her sweet moments followed by cruel ones, her public affection contrasted with private resentment. I blamed stress. I blamed youth. I blamed misunderstandings. But now, watching her grin into her phone, something inside me finally clicked. She enjoyed tearing me down. She needed someone to belittle so she could feel important. And she believed I would never push back. She was wrong. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" I said quietly. She froze mid-scroll. The way her shoulders stiffened told me she heard something different in my tone. Something unfamiliar. She turned slowly, confusion creeping into her expression. "What is it?" she asked. I stepped forward, just one step, enough to meet her eyes without raising my voice. The room went still, the kind of stillness that settles before a truth is revealed. "I saw your video," I said. "And I think it's time we clear something up." Her smile dropped. She opened her mouth to speak. And that's where this part of the story ends. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could form a single word, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger and it wasn't fear, it was certainty. A still, quiet certainty that told me I no longer needed to match her tone, her attitude, or her performance. I simply stepped back, letting the tension settle between us, and walked toward the hallway cabinet where I kept the children's art supplies. My heart was steady. My hands were steady. For the first time in months, I felt fully in control. He followed me halfway, confused. "What do you mean, clear something up?" she asked. But her voice didn't carry the same confidence she had when talking to her phone. It trembled ever so slightly, like she sensed a shift but couldn't see its shape yet. I didn't answer her, not directly. Instead, I opened the drawer that held random household papers, letting it slide out with a soft wooden scrape. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just needed a moment to breathe, to think, to place my emotions somewhere I could handle them. Her presence behind me was sharp, restless, impatient. I could feel her waiting, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. You saw my video, she pressed. And? I closed the drawer gently. And, I said quietly, you should be a little more careful about the stories you choose to tell. Her eyebrows lifted. Are you threatening me? No, I said simply. Just stating a fact. She scoffed, an immature, almost nervous sound, and walked back toward the living room, muttering something about me being dramatic. But the wobble in her voice told me she wasn't as confident as she wanted to appear. When she disappeared behind the corner, I exhaled slowly and made my way to my bedroom. The hallway light flickered slightly as I walked, a bulb that needed changing though she'd never noticed. The carpet beneath my feet felt worn but familiar, grounding me as I moved toward the small dresser I rarely opened. This was where the real story began. Not with her video. Not with her laugh. But with the quiet instincts that had guided me long before today. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled the second drawer open. Inside, beneath a neatly folded stack of scarves I hadn't worn in years, was a thick manila envelope. Heavier now than when I first started. I placed my fingertips on the edge of it, letting the weight of the past 12 months settle into my palms. I hadn't built this file out of bitterness. I wasn't even sure why I began at first. Maybe age sharpens a woman's senses. Maybe years of raising children and watching people shift their masks teaches you to spot change before it happens. Or maybe I simply knew that something about her didn't match the sweetness she offered my son, and I wanted to be ready in case the truth ever surfaced. The first item I placed inside the envelope wasn't dramatic at all. It was a printed text message. A message where she called my son too sensitive for worrying when she stayed out late. It bothered me the moment I saw it because she'd told him she was exhausted from working overtime that same night. I didn't know which version was false, but I knew they couldn't both be true. So I printed it. Quietly. Calmly. Without judgment. The next few months added small things. Photos she sent to friends from bars on nights she claimed she was at the office. Receipts tucked inside her purse from places she said she'd never been. Deleted search histories I came across only because she used my laptop one afternoon and forgot to log out. Nothing dangerous. Nothing incriminating. Just inconsistencies. A pattern forming a shadow of the woman she pretended to be. But what truly pushed me to keep building the file was the shift in her behavior toward the children. Little things at first. Missing bedtime because she was filming. Leaving them with me while claiming she had errands. Only to return with shopping bags she said were sponsored. Forgetting school forms I later found crumpled in her car. My son saw the good in everyone, especially in her. He always had. He was a kind man, and kind men sometimes mistake chaos for charm. I loved him for his heart, but his heart often blinded him. So I documented what he didn't see. Back in the present, sitting on my bed with the envelope in my hands, I could hear her pacing in the living room. Her steps were uneven, tapping against the hardwood floor in a rhythm that revealed her uncertainty. She wasn't used to not being the loudest voice in the room. She wasn't used to me saying no. She wasn't used to silence from the person she targeted. I slid the envelope onto my lap and opened it. The papers inside rustled softly, each one a piece of truth she believed would stay hidden. I ran my fingers over the top sheet, a printed screenshot of her messages from last spring. The ones where she complained about babysitting her own kids, while telling her followers she handled motherhood alone. My chest tightened, not from anger but sadness. I had held hope for her once. I wanted her to feel like she had a mother here, someone older to guide and support her. But she never wanted a mother, she wanted an audience. As I sifted through the pages, more memories surfaced. The morning she accused me of losing her favorite jacket, only for me to find it 2 days later inside her car trunk where she tossed it in a rush. The afternoon she said I embarrassed her by correcting her grocery list, though I hadn't corrected her at all. I'd simply asked whether she wanted whole milk or skim. The little lies she told to paint herself as the victim. The little digs she made in front of guests, pretending they were jokes. She underestimated older women. She underestimated quiet people. And she underestimated me most of all. I closed the envelope and held it against my chest, breathing in slowly. My room smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets I kept in my drawer. The scent calmed me, pulling me back to myself. I was not a woman who yelled. I was not a woman who sought conflict. But I was also not a woman who allowed disrespect to grow without tending to it. A soft knock startled me from my thoughts. "Are you coming out?" she called, her voice strained. We weren't done talking. I stood, smoothing the bedspread with one hand while holding the envelope in the other. Yes, I answered. I'm coming. As I walked back down the hallway, my pulse was steady. Not rushed. Not panicked. Steady. The lights hummed softly overhead, casting warm tones on the walls. The house felt different now, like it was holding its breath. She stood near the kitchen island, arms folded tightly, lips pressed into a thin line. You're acting strange, she said. Like you're hiding something. I set the envelope on the table, not opening it, not explaining it, just letting it sit there like a quiet presence. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of it. What's that? A conversation, I said softly. One we'll finish when he gets home. She went pale. Not because she knew what was inside, but because she didn't know. And not knowing frightened her more than anything else. For the first time she realized I wasn't the one in the dark. I could still see that uncertainty lingering in her eyes the next morning when I placed the envelope neatly in the center of the dining table. She pretended not to notice it as she hurried around the kitchen, but her glances kept drifting back toward it, sharp and restless. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Silence can speak clearer than accusation ever will. At 8:07 a.m. the front door opened. My son stepped inside, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he'd been thinking too much on the drive home. His work bag hung loosely from his shoulder and his tie was slightly crooked. He was the kind of man who never fixed those things until someone pointed them out. Usually she pointed them out. But she had left early that morning for brunch with friends, slipping out before he even woke. He looked tired. Not physically, emotionally tired, the kind where someone carries questions they don't yet know how to ask. Mom? He said softly, surprised to see me sitting in the dining room at this hour. You're up early. I couldn't sleep well, I said. Sit with me a moment. His eyes drifted to the envelope immediately. He noticed things she didn't. He always had. What's this? He asked. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I slid the envelope toward him with 2 fingers, the movement small but decisive. He hesitated, glancing at me before opening it. Is everything okay? He whispered, his voice gentle, unsure. That depends on what you see, I said. He lifted the flap and pulled out the first few pages. At first, his expression was neutral. Mild confusion, maybe curiosity. But as he flipped through, the confusion deepened. His brows pulled together, his jaw tightened, and a slow, heavy silence settled over the room. He read messages she sent complaining about the children, moments she claimed she was overwhelmed by motherhood while she spent those same nights out with friends. He studied screenshots of her posts praising herself for handling the home alone, contradicting the photos that showed me cooking meals, feeding the kids, waiting for her to come home long after she said she'd be back. His breathing changed, subtle at first, then heavier. He wasn't angry yet. He was processing. And processing is a quiet storm. Mom? He murmured, eyes scanning another page. Why didn't you tell me she said these things? I wanted you to see them instead of hearing them, I said. There's a difference. He nodded slightly, still reading. One page slipped from his fingers and fluttered onto the table. I bent to pick it up, but he reached it first. His hand brushed mine, a brief, trembling touch. He wasn't trembling because he doubted me. He was trembling because for the first time he doubted her. He swallowed hard. When did you start keeping these? A while ago, I replied softly. Before things became what they are now. His eyes moved to the photo from last spring, the one she had taken at a rooftop bar while she told him she was finishing a deadline. He stared at it for a long time, then set it down carefully as if the truth might crack the tabletop if he handled it too roughly. A quiet knock from the laundry room door startled both of us. The dryer buzzed with its usual end-of-cycle hum, snapping him momentarily out of his shock. I stood up to stop the sound, letting him have a moment alone. The warm air from the dryer brushed my face, carrying the faint scent of lavender detergent. I folded a few shirts, trying to steady my hands, though my heart ached watching him struggle through the truths on those pages. I returned to the dining room slowly, unsure whether he needed comfort or space. He looked up, his eyes glassy but alert. She posted something yesterday, he said quietly. Did that hurt you? It disappointed me, I answered honestly, because she knew people would believe her. He pressed his lips together, thinking. She told me she was making harmless content. That it was just jokes. It wasn't harmless to me, I said. But I understand why she said it. He nodded again, not defensively, thoughtfully. His mind was piecing together moments he had brushed aside before. She'd always been charming, energetic, effortlessly social. But charm doesn't erase contradiction. And he was beginning to see those contradictions clearly now. He set the papers back inside the envelope but didn't seal it. Instead, he placed his palm on top of it, almost protectively. I didn't know all this was happening, he whispered. I know, I said. That's why I needed you to see it. His gaze softened with something between regret and gratitude. And in that softened look, a small weight lifted from my chest. Not relief, just acknowledgement. Before either of us could speak again, the front door latch clicked. Her voice echoed through the entryway, cheerful, loud, unmistakably confident. I'm home. You won't believe what happened. Her sentence stopped abruptly when she turned the corner and saw us sitting there. Her shopping bag slipped slightly on her arm. Her smile faltered. Oh, she said slowly. You're both here. Her eyes jumped straight to the envelope. Even from across the room, I watched her shoulders tense. She tried to mask it, offering a strained, shaky laugh. What's going on? She asked, her tone light but her posture rigid. My son didn't answer. He simply tapped the envelope with 2 fingers. We need to talk. The sound of those 4 words seemed to pull the oxygen out of the room. She blinked rapidly, looked at me as if I might explain it away, then looked back at him. Talk about what? He slid the envelope toward her. About this. Her hands didn't reach for it. Instead, she stepped back just half a foot, but enough to show fear threading beneath her attempted composure. I don't know what that is, she said. My son's voice was steady. It's everything you thought stayed hidden. The room went silent again. She put her bag down with trembling fingers, the paper crinkling loudly in the quiet. She pulled out a chair but didn't sit. Her legs were unsteady and she hid it by gripping the back of the chair tightly. Why are you doing this? She whispered, eyes darting between us. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just here. He reached into the envelope and pulled out 1 page. Did you write this? He asked, holding it up, not accusingly, just plainly. She inhaled sharply. Those are private messages. Who gave you that? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because the real question wasn't who gave it, it was why it existed at all. Her breathing grew uneven. She looked cornered, her eyes darting toward the hallway as if she was planning an escape. But running wouldn't save her. Not from this. My son placed the paper down gently. We need the truth, he said. All of it. She sank into the chair then, but only halfway, as if sitting fully would somehow make the moment real. She rubbed her temples and whispered something too low to hear. I watched quietly, hands folded in my lap, heart steady but heavy. There was no satisfaction in this. Only necessity. She was unraveling thread by thread, and for the first time she realized I wasn't the one pulling those threads loose. She did that all on her own. And she hadn't even opened the rest of the folder yet. For a long moment no one moved. She stared at the envelope as if it were something dangerous, something alive. Her fingers twitched at her sides, opening and closing as though she wanted to reach for it but couldn't make herself touch it. My son sat perfectly still, but the tension radiated from him like heat off pavement. I could hear the faint ticking of the kitchen clock, each second stretching. Finally, she swallowed hard and reached for the envelope. The flap brushed against her knuckles and she flinched like the paper had burned her. She lifted the top page with hesitant fingertips, eyes darting back and forth across the printed lines. Her lips parted slightly as she read, not enough to speak, just enough to tremble. Where did you get this? She whispered, her voice cracking. I don't think that's the question you should be asking, my son said, his tone steady but wounded. The question is why it exists. Her breathing hitched. She clutched the page tightly, wrinkling the edges. I watched her eyes dart to the next sheet in the stack, the one with the date highlighted in the corner. She flipped to it with trembling fingers, and when she saw the photo clipped to the side, one she thought she deleted months ago, her entire posture sagged. It's not what it looks like, she said quickly, shaking her head. You're misunderstanding everything. My son's voice dropped. I haven't said what I think it looks like. But you're judging me, she snapped, the panic pushing her voice higher. You're sitting there judging me like I've done something unforgivable. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply repeated, "Then explain it." She opened her mouth but no sound came out. Instead she set the papers down with a shaky exhale, rubbing her forehead like the truth had become too heavy for her to hold. I watched her crumble slowly, piece by piece. I saw the denial flicker into fear, then into confusion, then into something closer to guilt. But not quite guilt. More like the dread of being caught without a plan. She picked up another sheet, messages from a friend she no longer spoke to. Ones where she described me as dead weight, and my son as too soft to stand up for himself. Her face tightened and for a moment her eyes closed as if she couldn't bear to look at herself on paper. "You weren't supposed to see that," she whispered. He leaned forward. "Why did you write it?" She shook her head again, more violently this time. "It was just venting. Everyone vents. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed." "And the nights you lied about where you were?" he asked quietly. "Was that stress too?" Her eyes shot open. "I didn't lie." He pulled another page from the envelope, the one with the time-stamped bar photo from last spring. He slid it toward her across the table. "Explain that then." She lifted the picture with trembling hands, staring at it as if seeing it for the first time. The reflection of neon lights shimmered on her face in the photo, her smile wide, her glass raised. A version of her she had kept hidden from us. A version she showed only to certain people. Her voice softened. "I just needed a break." "That's not what you told me," he said. She closed her eyes, breathing unevenly. "I didn't want to worry you. You worried me more by lying." Her shoulders slumped. She looked smaller somehow, like a person shrinking under the weight of her own choices. Then slowly she turned her head toward me. "I didn't know you were collecting things," she said, her words laced with something between accusation and disbelief. "I wasn't collecting," I replied calmly. "I was noticing." That silence that followed was sharper than any argument we could have had. She stared at me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Part resentment, part fear, part something she didn't want to acknowledge. The truth is a mirror. It shows people who they are, not who they pretend to be. She stood abruptly, pushing her chair back with a scrape. "I need water," she muttered, rushing to the sink. The faucet sputtered for a moment before releasing a steady stream. She filled a glass halfway, spilled some on her hands and took a shaky sip. But the water didn't steady her. She kept glancing over her shoulder at the table, at the envelope, at the evidence she never expected to face. My son followed her movements with quiet eyes. He didn't yell. He didn't demand. He waited. And waiting sometimes is far more powerful than confronting. She set the glass down and gripped the edge of the counter. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, her voice strained. "Lots of people exaggerate things online. It doesn't mean anything." "It means something to me," he replied. She let out a shaky laugh. "So now you're taking her side?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at me first, then back at her. "This isn't about sides," he said. "This is about truth." She pressed a hand to her chest. "You're hurting me." He looked down, pain flickering across his face. "Do you know how many times you've hurt her?" The room went still again. Not silent, still. He blinked, stunned. "Hurt her? I never." He cut her off gently. "Mom isn't the problem here." Those words hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled a step back, her hand sliding to the countertop to steady herself. I watched her face shift in real time. Shock, disbelief, anger, humiliation. Finally, humiliation won. "It's all twisted," she said desperately. "You're both twisting everything." "We're reading your own words," he replied softly. Her fingers curled into a fist. I didn't know." "That's the issue," he said quietly. "You didn't know. You didn't care to know." Her breathing quickened. She paced from the counter to the fridge, then back to the stove, her movements rapid and disorganized. When panic sets in, some people shout. Some freeze. She moved, restlessly, aimlessly, looking for a version of the truth that could save her. But no version existed. Finally, she stopped pacing and stared at the envelope again. "What else is in there?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Read it," I said. She shook her head violently. "No. I can't." "You need to," my son said gently but firmly. She sank into the chair again, this time with less defiance. Her hands hovered over the envelope but didn't open it. She looked up at me instead, really looked. "Did you hate me this whole time?" she asked. The question caught me off guard, not because of the words but because of the rawness behind them. "No," I said softly. "I didn't hate you. I kept hoping you would find a way to be honest." She stared down at the table, her hair falling forward like a curtain. "I didn't think it mattered," she murmured. "I didn't think anyone cared what I said online." "It mattered to your family," I said. "And you didn't see that." Her shoulders slumped again. The bravado she wore like armor had cracked completely. My son leaned back, exhaling deeply. "We're not done," he said. "But we can't move forward until everything is out." She nodded shakily. But the truth was she still hadn't seen the most important part. And neither had he. Her fall had begun, but she didn't yet understand how far it would go. She sat there with her hands hovering over the envelope, breathing unsteady, eyes wide and glossy. My son watched her with a mixture of disappointment and quiet resolve. I could feel the tension weaving itself through the room, thick enough to touch. A part of me wanted to look away from her unraveling, but another part, the part she had pushed into silence for months, finally felt ready to look straight at her without flinching. I slid the chair back and sat down slowly. "Go ahead," I said gently. "It's time." She didn't argue this time. Her fingers slipped under the stack of papers and lifted a few sheets. She skimmed them quickly, like someone tearing through a story they hoped would change on the next page. But each page reflected the same truth. And the more she read, the more her face changed. Disbelief melting into shame, shame battling panic, panic settling into dread. When she reached the photo of her boys sitting on the couch with me during one of her late-night work shifts, she stopped. Her thumb brushed the edge of the picture, and for the first time guilt, not fear, seemed to flicker behind her eyes. "I didn't know they looked like that when I was gone," she whispered. My son leaned forward. "They always look for you." Her shoulders lifted with a sharp inhale. "I didn't think." "That's the pattern," he said. "You never think." She gripped the paper tightly, bending its edge. "I didn't realize. I honestly didn't realize how much you depended on me to be different." I spoke softly. "We didn't need you to be perfect. We just needed you to be honest." She stared down at the pages again, her throat bobbing. Then she reached for another sheet, flipping it over with trembling hands. This one held the transcript of the voicemail she left her cousin last month. One where she called me dead weight for not understanding her social media career. Her eyes closed. "I didn't mean any of that." "But you said it," I replied. "And you lived like you meant it." She opened her eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw a struggling girl instead of the difficult woman she had become. But sympathy didn't erase damage. Hurt didn't excuse humiliation. And good intentions didn't heal wounds left untreated. My son's voice broke the silence. "There's one more thing." She looked up sharply. "What?" He turned to me, giving me a small nod. The signal we had discussed without ever speaking aloud. The moment she had prepared for without knowing it. I reached into the side pocket of the envelope and pulled out a folded sheet, one I had kept separate from the rest, not out of secrecy but because it was the key she had never expected me to hold. She froze as I placed it on the table. "What is that?" she whispered. I opened it carefully, smoothing the crease with my palm. It was the transcript of a conversation she had recorded by accident, the one she left in her voice memos last winter when she thought her phone had locked. A conversation where she told her friend how she planned to expose me online for content growth. How she believed older women were easy targets. How she thought humiliating me would boost engagement. Her hand flew to her mouth. I didn't even know this existed." "You recorded it yourself," I said. "Your phone saved it." My son's jaw tightened. "You used my mother for likes." She shook her head frantically. No, I didn't. Well, I was frustrated and she was always." I raised a hand gently. "Please stop. You don't need to explain it. You only need to face it." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I never meant to hurt you like this. But I thought it didn't matter." "It mattered," I said softly. "But not for the reasons you think." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I inhaled deeply, letting the truth fill my lungs before I released it. "I wasn't collecting evidence to punish you. I kept it because no one saw what was happening. And I needed to protect myself. Not from you, but from losing myself. My voice wavered, the emotion rising despite my best attempts to keep it steady. You took my silence and treated it like weakness. You mistook kindness for invisibility. And I let you, because I believed you would grow into the woman you wanted to pretend to be. Her tears fell freely now, dripping onto the table. I'm so sorry, she whispered. My son's eyes softened, but he didn't interrupt. This moment wasn't his to fix. It belonged to me. You don't owe me perfection, I continued. But you owe this family respect. And you've been giving your respect to strangers on the internet while giving us whatever was left over. She bowed her head, shoulders trembling. I rested my fingertips on the envelope. Read the last page. She hesitated before pulling out the final sheet. A simple, quiet summary of every positive thing she had done in the past year. Not the lies. Not the contradictions. The good moments. The small efforts. The glimpses of potential. Her eyes widened in shock. Why did you include these? Because you're not only the worst things you've done, I said softly. And neither am I. She read the page slowly. Tears fell onto her lap as she whispered, You saw these moments too? I saw everything, I said. The pain. The effort. The confusion. And I knew you were fighting battles you wouldn't admit to anyone. My son exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck again, but this time the gesture wasn't stress. It was release. She covered her face with both hands, sobbing quietly. I don't know how to fix what I did. You start by telling the truth, I said. Not online. Not for them. For us. She nodded slowly, breath shaking. And then, I added gently, you live differently. One day at a time. For the first time since this began, she didn't argue. She didn't blame. She didn't deflect. She simply sat there, raw and broken open, stripped of excuses. The room softened around us. Not with forgiveness, not yet, but with possibility. The possibility that healing could come if she truly wanted it. My son reached across the table and placed his hand on mine. It was warm, steady, full of gratitude he didn't need words to express. Mom, he said quietly, thank you. I squeezed his hand. I didn't do this to hurt her. I did this so we could see clearly. He nodded. And now we do. She looked up at me through red, swollen eyes. Can I earn another chance? Her voice was small. Sincere. And for the first time she wasn't speaking for an audience. I stood slowly, walked to the window and opened the curtains. Light spilled into the room. Clean, bright, honest. The kind of light that reveals everything without cruelty. You'll have to earn it, I said softly. But yes, you can. She broke into a soft, fragile cry, less from shame now, more from relief. I turned back to her and felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Not victory. Peace. This wasn't the day I exposed her. This wasn't the day I punished her. This was the day I took my silence back. And I knew, as the sunlight warmed my face, that no one would ever take it from me again. Thank you for listening to my story. If this touched you, or if you've ever faced family betrayal yourself, subscribe for more powerful stories every week. You are not alone.